and welcome to another edition of Future Forward. I'm Steve Rosenbaum.
I'm Gene DeRose.
And, today we're going to put on a hat we've both worn before, and we're going to see if we can really sync up with publishers.
Yep.
Talk about what's going on with publishers, what's going on with platforms and publishers, and really see if we can make it less gloomy than it, at least on one level, seems to be.
Yeah.
So I'll start with a admission, Gene. I am making use of this podcast to try and work through some issues I'm dealing with, because I'm going to be moderating a panel at South by Southwest on Friday of this week, and the title of it is Facebook and Publishers: The Evolution of News, which is maybe a slightly benign title for what is not going to be a benign topic. We have three very strong panelists. Alex Hardman from Facebook, who's the head of news, very smart, very engaged. Brian Stelter from CNN, and Sarah Fisher from Axios. And so, it's going to be frothy. It's going to be...
Yeah. And you should, let's make sure to report in on what happened next week. And, we're doing this almost every week, and you and I said it offline. This doesn't necessarily get swallowed up by Trump and fake news. There's a bigger picture here in which this is a piece of important context. But what we're focusing on today, and I think what you're zeroing in on nicely, are the business realities, for publishers. And is the balance in the ecosystem okay right now? The one thing that we know, which is a good context for all of these stories that you've linked up, is that Google and Google and Facebook, to a lesser extent Twitter and Apple, dominate advertising revenues. It doesn't leave a lot of the pie left. It's a growing market, but it isn't necessarily going to the publishers who traditionally have those relationships with advertisers. And that's the quandary.
So is it almost like, you've got the big Walmart and Whole Foods that own the grocery business, and then what's left are the bodegas on the corner? Does that make publishers the bodegas on the corner?
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the Walmart is making so many of its own products that they're getting the transaction money directly, and your can of soup is not necessarily getting all the sales it used to.
Well, yeah, and but before we get into publishing, which is where we're going to spend the bulk of the half hour, and let's just do loving and hating, because people have told me they really enjoy. They're fond of the hating chapter in particular. They're like, what's Gene going to hate this week?
Yeah, and I'm a little better at hating because it's like a lot of things. Your expectations are that things run smoothly, and I have probably a why the hell is this not working better point of view. And so, equilibrium is I don't notice anything. Anyway, and it does come down to a little bit of this right now, because I'm loving something that I love when it works, and I'm hating something that should be unavoidable. So what I'm loving lately, and it's because I'm a sports fan, and this is starting to be the kind of time of year when March Madness and a lot of things are going on, and streaming to your television is something that has been a kind of a mystery and very, very low tech, but almost nobody seems to know how to do it regularly. And I love when it's easy to do. My Chromecast is a wonderful thing, except when it's fighting with the world of Apple. The little wavy thing that signals to you when you're watching video that your TV can just suddenly take that on. It's a big deal, and I just think there's still a lot of opportunity missed, because no one has a business incentive that we're completely aware of.
So wait, I'm sorry, you've confused me. Is this the loving or the hating part?
This is the loving, yeah. You know what? It's so funny. So I'll move on to the hating because it's a similar thing. I love it when it works. What I hate are repeat ads, which is a really good lead-in into our video. You know, why, when I'm a deep customer delivering long tail dollars to, and it could be anyone, it could be CNN, it could be ESPN, whenever somebody's queuing up a bunch of videos in a row and a car company or a P&G seems to have bought that out, all they do is repeat the same ads over and over again. I mean, I blame more than anyone the ESPN if they're looping that role over and over again. But my gosh, what a missed opportunity. If this world were saturated, how can I see the same ad over and over again?
Is it still the broadcast sales guys and the digital sales guys slugging it out? Because they could just do make goods in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I would think that the publishers would, in the name of consumer sanity, I stop watching the videos because I'm forced to watch the same 5 or 15-second ad over and over again, and it's amazing. So somebody has to bring some discipline to it in a way where everyone wins, you know, because there's no way that Chevrolet ad repeated 20 times. It may get the CPM, you know, but that's bullshit CPM because, you know, I'm increasingly hating Chevrolet while I'm seeing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, so let's dig into what's going on with publishers, and we're going to do it a little bit upside down. We're going to start with some flat out good news.
Yep.
Publishers are really doing well with Twitter video. So this is reported by Digiday literally this in the last 5 days, and they're talking about publishers are talking about a big resurgence as they get a boost from Twitter video.
Yeah, and
what do you make of that?
Do you tell me first a little question, because to say that it's grown by 70% or 4 times what it was whenever, is it significant, or is it from the meager amount it was to something that is showing up on the map? I mean, it's encouraging, but Twitter and video have had a hard relationship.
So I think it's not yet a big number, but I think, you know, one of the things that's going on is, you know, all these feeds are changing, right? So you've got consumer kind of exhaustion going, wait, I thought Twitter was 140 characters, but now it's twice that. And I thought Twitter was text, but now all of a sudden it's images and now it's video. But publishers are looking for, you know, I mean, it works backwards from advertisers are going to pay for audience, and publishers are trying to reach enough people to get paid a CPM so that they keep the lights lit. And,
right.
You know, as Facebook is dialing down video ads and YouTube is having all kinds of problems with safety, you know, Twitter becomes the de facto winner.
Right. And I think that there is a natural evolutionary conflation of form. By that I mean there used to be very distinct what the 140 characters of text was in your feed when you're following a bunch of people you choose, whereas the news feed in Facebook was something a little more personal and a little more lively, whereas something like a Snapchat or a YouTube or an Instagram was largely media based. Now, I don't know if you've noticed that there's a lot more copy just by nature in a lot of Instagram posts. People are just using that space. The visualization on Twitter, I know their algorithm has changed, but I think they're making the visual attraction of video and photos have you leap to it more, right? They've evolved what that interface looks like in a way that brings rich media into it. And of course, Facebook, you know, is trying to swallow the earth. So they're trying to do everything. I do feel like, you know, Twitter still is essentially this idea of past links, and whether it's a snippet of an article, an opinion, a video, a photo, I still like it boxed in like that. But it's the algorithms that these guys are building, right? I mean, isn't that the evolution that changes and makes dollars come or go?
So is really what's going on here in chapter 1 that publishers lost access to their audience and now they're fighting to get it back? And I don't know whether that means views inside someone else's platform or whether or not the secret meetings at the publisher level are like, you know what, all right, screw this. We got to get people coming back to our site. We got to get them logged into our experience.
Right.
Send them a newsletter first thing in the morning, get them to click on the newsletter, get them to come to the site, essentially throw up their hands and go, these platforms aren't going to do it for us.
Well, look, chapter one, the BC of this, in the .com era, often with traditional publishers was we want to get them to go turn on the TV, open the newspaper, buy the magazine in print, right? Today, what they want that helps them get the most money, sure, get me all the way back. But the world has been woken up in the last few years by BuzzFeed, for instance, which at least has built an audience model around complete decentralization, right? So there's come to my site, there's complete decentralization, and then there's can I live and have a presence and a subscription and followers within these channels, right? Facebook, Twitter, we're going to talk about YouTube and subscriptions in a second. And I think the bottom line is that it's hard enough for these publishers to keep north being north and south being south without the algorithms changing all the time. It is so hard to program this with the required sophistication to sort of, have kismet strike and, make your dollars move. It's really programming your distribution is itself an art and a science.
So Recode has a piece out that suggests that Google is replacing Facebook's traffic. And, I read it twice trying to understand. Now, it's Chartbeat data, and we like the Chartbeat guys. But, some of this comes down to, the AMP product. And,
Yeah. To explain what AMP product is, it's advanced mobile placement. Is that right? Wait,
advanced
accelerated
mobile publishing, but it's essentially a high-speed delivery of mobile optimized pages for publishers.
Right. Google now taking on the loading of those mobile pages helps them load faster and avoid abandonment, et cetera, which is a big deal, right? But that's very different. And I think that, again, this is conflation because it's very apples and orange to say they're replacing that traffic, right? Because we know that the Google traffic we're talking about is search-based stuff versus the stuff that you will incidentally run into because you're following somebody or something in Facebook or Twitter. So
I feel like the future is starting to appear before my eyes like an apparition.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my slightly optimistic view of the future, and you tell me whether or not you buy it.
Yep.
So a whole bunch of the publishers that I like start showing up in my news feed as, I'm sorry, you don't have a subscription to this. So your friend, Gene puts up an article from the Wall Street Journal and I go and click on it and I get to a paywall, or Washington Post, or I get to a paywall, or the information I get to a paywall, or on and on and on. So finally I throw up my hands and I go, I give up. I'm not going to I'm going to pick. So I know that I want the Washington Post. I know I want the New York Times, and I pick one or two more and I shell down my 50, 75, $100 a year, whatever the number is. And I say, the experience, now that I'm a subscriber, now that I'm a member of this club, the experience on the site is kind of better. Like I get community and I get more gizmos and I get better articles and like these little snippets on Facebook. Facebook doesn't want to give them to me. They've already said we want to be somewhat out of the news business a little bit. They're saying 5% of their feed was public news and they're dialing it down to 4 is what they're saying.
Which is meaningless. I mean, honestly, I'm not really sure what that means. And just so we make sure we get to it, because they also launched a local news, accelerate. And I'm just saying it because, and then they go on to describe the local news being the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Boston Globe. And sure, I know they mean, and they have the ability to make their algorithms yield local articles. But I think there's a conflict in, they're trying so hard to control what it is we see. And we're losing the natural flow. And it's not fair to publishers to not know which way the wind is going to blow next week in order to build.
So Campbell Brown and the head of Newsfeed were at Recode a couple weeks back and gave, I thought, a very interesting talk on stage or interview with Peter Kafka.
Yep.
And they talked a lot about wanting trustworthy news and embracing trustworthiness. And when Kafka, who can be kind of a curmudgeon about these things, tried to drill down to define trustworthiness, everyone kind of went, hemina, because it turns out, and I thought Campbell was actually very straight up. She's like, we're this early days on a lot of this stuff. They're just trying to figure it out. The local news project, I mean, they're putting $3 million behind it, which can sound like a lot of money, but for a company of that size, it's really,
that's right.
It's not. And they're trying to figure out how to support local publishers by helping them sell subscriptions.
It just doesn't make as much sense. I think the two markers in this that I just think you have to kind of keep going back to, you just mentioned one, which is this elusive trustworthiness of news, the truth of the facts. And we've talked about this before, but I think it's incredibly elusive to nail it down the way they want to. And what you're left with that needs to be the focus for now is the trustworthiness of the sources, the reputation of the sources. Is it an official source? Beyond that, everything else is wild, wild west. The other thing I just want to say really quickly is that, look, until the day after the election in 2016, all of the evolution of Facebook's news feed was a money grab. They were evolving everything with in parallel to their massive audience gains to drive the dollars and get the massive advertising dollars, everything about that. And that all changed. They're trying to relearn how to think about this stuff. And the idea of controlling news and publishers, honestly, if I was a publisher, I'd be so infuriated. It's just hard to make a business work.
So I want to make sure we have enough time. So let's just finish up the good news portion.
Yep.
The last piece is Snapchat seems to be kind of making it work for publishers a little bit. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it goes. It melds nicely with some of the revenue model stuff, because the form and format of Snapchat is a new and different kind of multimedia pastiche, right? It's this thing that and so to the extent that they've smoothed the road to help publishers have a play in this, and a lot of this works well as branded content for publishers too, so it kind of has a little secret extra story to it. The more they do that, it's great. But noted in that story that we also have to remember is that what they really can't keep up with is demand to have help with the content creation for Snapchat, right? Which is ironic that a traditional publisher is out of its depth in creating the content or finishing it for this platform.
So let's just go to chapter 2 and talk about subscriptions.
Yep.
That seems to be the current. Everybody's all a Twitter, lack of a better word, about subscriptions, and yet again, Digiday comes in here with a slightly grim headline saying, no silver bullet here. Like that's not going to solve it.
Yeah, and I think you've got, there was a wave way back in the early days. Nobody charged, and then the Wall Street Journal charged, and more recently you've had waves of newspapers deciding, New York Times, Washington Post. What I run into, and they have had some success, unless you are a mega property that at one time might have claimed a large percentage of people's attention in their region or area or topic, it's not realistic. People are not going to pay micro amounts for subscriptions, and I think that this is where you have to divide it into the type of content, because Pandora and Spotify is a whole different thing. Video is a whole different thing, right? We're not really talking about Netflix subscriptions, and YouTube subscriptions to my channel is not something that costs me, but is really important now, right? Getting people to become a fan of or a subscriber to someone in Facebook, those aren't revenue opportunities, are they?
So are you so Digiday's again's take here is it's all going to end in tears.
Yeah, well,
I mean, do you agree?
I do agree, because I think it's only a minority, a very, very small minority that can realistically expect it, and I think it's too simple and too easy with the diversification of revenues out there. People's expectations no matter what people say, and I know we have ad blockers and all this other stuff out there, when push comes to shove, most people would rather receive a few ads than pay a single cent for something.
All right, so now we get to my area. The thing that, my phone rings, people all the time want me to, rain down on them a fire hose of money because they're going to pivot to video.
Right.
And, I've been, I have to say that as much as I appreciate the phone calls, it's hard for me to say to somebody, oh, yes, you should definitely pivot your text and image operation to a video play because that's going to solve it for you. That's going to and there have been a number of these pivot to video tests recently.
Right.
And they've not gone very well, right?
Yeah, especially, and you would, when you say it like that, we're talking about more narrowly those that have not been in the video business or legacy in print or something else. And so it feels like it's something they've got to do, but it's not easy. I kind of look at entropy, and it always seems to me, and we've talked about this in terms of podcasts too, diversification to rich media, that, hey, if you're writing this article and you've got this special section or you're doing stuff every day on the stock market, why not get your writers and the interviews and, get it on video as well? Isn't it just two birds with one stone, and then suddenly you've got another form and format? It's not that easy though, is it?
So Fast Company calls it the pivot to video bloodbath.
Yeah.
Just because, there's only so many terrible words you can use, and bloodbath seems to be the best one. That being said, though, can you think of anyone that, is doing significantly more video and is living to tell the tale?
Well, I think I mentioned this in a past episode or two, and I don't know offhand what the financials are, but I look at somebody like The Guardian, and they create beautiful short videos, little 3 to 5 minute mini docs. They grab a lot of attention. It's put their brand on the map, but I don't know how big of a deal it is in the larger context. You got to have a production capability, right? You got to build staff. I think a lot of these guys should be using third parties and partners until they can prove it to themselves, and it's expensive. Can you think of anyone that's pivoted reasonably well?
No. I think again, my favorite, get out of jail free card. If you get into time, you and I remember when, people would say around the house, shh, don't talk so loud. He's on long distance.
Right. Oh my
right?
God. Really did.
Which is now, all phone calls are now free, effectively. So
right.
If you wait long enough, things really do change.
That's right.
Right. So I can imagine a time, and, for example, the New York Times is doing a lot of experimentation with video, and some of it's very good.
I think the Times has done a good job.
What? Yeah, did a good job. But do I, when I think about turning on, do I say, oh, I'm going to go watch the New York Times? Oh, honey, the New York Times is on? No. I mean.
No. And by the way, we've talked about this forever, that the technology and the data of the internet is still so powered by text and by copy that the very discoverability of video, the searchability, it's really hard to make things work in the way that you want them to. And so it's a slow evolution towards this kind of stuff being valuable and meaningful. And I just don't think that you're going to see change overnight, but we all know the data points that say in a Facebook feed, in a Twitter feed, in an email, people will click on the video. They'll click on the photos by 3 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, and so there is a little bit of a sense that we have to be there.
But this brings us to our pivot, and I think a good one, which is it might be that something really is going to change. it might be that what we're up against is kind of a fundamental, and there is some early buzz talking about blockchain as being the thing that fundamentally changes how consumers interact, particularly with video. And so there's an organization, and I'm going to talk to them later in the week, and so I'll have more to tell you about this time next week. But it is a startup that says that they want to build the YouTube on blockchain and connect consumers with revenue. And they've raised a significant amount of money. They've raised $20 million.
Yeah. So with that, it also promises to help track and keep an account and a ledger and an understanding in this massive diversification into a million places of distribution. It offers opportunities there too. And some of it may take the shape of, if you're familiar with music, the ASCAP and BMI that helps you make money off of a song, if it's used in a TV commercial or if it's used in an article or if it's used in a movie. It would be nice if something like that showed up someday that even unbeknownst to consumers was giving you licensing fees and things like that. But that's got to be a long way away, and it's hard to sort of pin down what it looks like.
So the company is called Lino.
Yep.
And they want to be the crypto YouTube. That's the and the money's coming from China, which is interesting. I guess what I think, and this is my politics creeping into the podcast, but if you look at what's happened to YouTube throughout its history, it's been a new vision for content trying to fit into an old advertising model.
Right.
And they're at kind of the end of that chapter, trying to be more safe, more conventional, more like television, more like mass media. And the truth is, what I've always believed and spent a career believing, to be honest, is that the thing about web video that makes it magical and special and exciting is that I can find the tiny little nuggets of things that interest me and pay creators incrementally out of my pocket or in some kind of a blockchain, mechanism for doing good work in things that are not mass media. And that has not come to be yet. So, I'm excited about seeing a new payment mechanism for a new media. That excites the hell out of me.
And just to be clear and bring it to a concrete place, because I think I might agree with you, and sometimes we disagree about some of this. What you mean is that if it was so transparent and frictionless and in front of you, like almost ridiculously small micropayments to see this or that individual, or pay a little more to always get the ones from these guys, or not have them get blocked when it shows up. That's kind of what you mean, right? A system where it's just little things are happening and transactions can be generated, but for you as an end user, this isn't like a giant Netflix and everything's free underneath it.
I'll give you an example. I have a certain kind of personality when it comes to tipping people at coffee shops. If I'm making a fancy coffee, happy to tip $1. But if I'm asking for a plain cup of coffee and it gets handed to me, reaching into my pocket for an extra $1 on top of the $3.50 for the cup of coffee seems like, for pouring a cup of coffee, doesn't seem like a good thing. That being said, now that almost all of my transactions are credit card, and they swing that tablet around and it says, how much would you like to tip? And it's got a bunch of choices on it. A, it's not physical, it's now digital. B, it's not that much money. It can be 37 cents or 45 cents or $1.25, depending on what the order is. But I'm finding I'm tipping more because it's a click as opposed to a wallet and a cash and I don't know. So I like the future where when I watch videos that matter to me, I pay 30 cents or I pay 7 cents or I pay 52 cents, or that it just become I fill up my Lino account with $10 a week to either tip or pay for video content, and it just doles it out in some kind of a mechanism. I like that. That strikes me as the nirvana outcome.
I think that if it got to incredibly, when money becomes, when it becomes a matter of pennies or something, maybe yes. But I think the short history of the internet has proven again and again that the irrational psychological foibles of making you pay for content have been very, very daunting. People just and when I say irrational, I mean we pay a monthly subscription fee to Netflix, and it feels to us like we're watching free stuff. Like
wait, hold on. But wait. But I want to go back to dig in your old paper files and scan and send me, if you can find one that doesn't have any personal information, an old phone bill.
Okay.
Remember when you had to look at your phone bill and you had to take a highlighter and go through it and say, wait a minute, did we call Akron for 47 minutes for that practice is gone.
Yeah. But
went from being like, oh my God, the phone bill's here, I have to review the phone bill, to that gone in what, 15 years?
Yep.
15 years.
Yeah.
So does that mean we have to wait 15 years before we don't have
See, look, where I think there's promise, and I'm not sure I apply it to video or content, is the Dwalas of the world and the things that have made us start to think about little bits of money and cash and micropayments being possible and fungible even between people. That plus what the promise of blockchain is in these whole sectors and areas does make me feel like the stuff we've talked about for 20 years, the frequency of micropayments just being a nothing in our world. Like, I still got to come out and type in that credit card frequently. I still have to turn off or on. I don't want to play ball with the Apple Pay. Maybe we're getting close on that. I just think people are really weird. I can't even read the Apple Store reviews, because if you don't put a filter of whether it was a for pay or free app into it, people just get up in a lather about something when they got to pay a dime and they can't even view things clearly. So I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever be willing to pay 25 cents for a New York Times video.
We are out of time, and so we will leave it there. I'm just going to say one more time to our friends and fans, if you're going to be in Austin and you're there for the Friday beginning of the news category, we'd love to see some people. Come on by. It's going to be a great panel. It's 5 o'clock Friday at the JW Marriott. And if not, we'll be back again next week with another edition of Future Forward. See you, Gene.
So long. Bye, Steve.